First of all, we cover pregnant persons. And not only do we, okay, I knew that would get a laugh out of all of you. Not all of you, some of you. We cover people who are pregnant. We cover them during the pregnancy and for a year following, regardless of their immigration status. We also have passed legislation to cover children. And we have tried to cover more and more children by increasing the age. So right now, I believe it's at 15, or is it 12? It was supposed to go to 15. I don't know if we actually did. 16. But we're trying to cover children who are in this country, regardless of their immigration status. So I just wanted to point that out. I do think it's the right thing to do. I have supported it. I have voted for it. I think we need to cover children with health care. Thank you.
Okay, how will you address the urgent threat of climate change with its rising sea levels, more frequent flooding, and extreme weather, specifically, and how it'll affect Connecticut?
So we have put in plans in place to help communities, particularly those along the shoreline, to modify some of their zoning plans and regulations, etc., towards where climate change has impacted those communities, more acutely there, obviously, on the shoreline, etc. That's one way. There's been funding in budgets for addressing the issue. In terms of, we talked about the public benefit again. So part of that is subsidizing solar, electric cars, offshore wind, things like that. Obviously, those are greener initiatives that provide a greener footprint in terms of, or no footprint in some circumstances, that put energy resources that are green on a grid. That's a good thing. However, with that said, I think this is part of the problem. I think we're subsidizing in some cases too much. You as a ratepayer in some cases are paying 3 or 4 times the regular market rate to subsidize the renewable energy market. And so the argument that I've often said is that we should be capping it. You as a ratepayer shouldn't be forced to pay 3 or 4 times on your electric bill to continue to subsidize these efforts. My argument would be those in the greener energy initiatives in those companies should be finding ways to create a better, more efficient product that ultimately we as ratepayers can afford. That is the best solution. And my argument would be we should be seeking ways to find relatively green energy resources now to let the green market catch up and provide more affordable rates to the ratepayer. I don't think it's fair to force a middle-class family in Bridgeport or anywhere else in this state to continue to subsidize these energy resources when it's driving people out of this state.
Completely agree with Steve. When it comes to resiliency, we did a bill last year with Steve and I did a bill with Senator Lopes and Representative Parker to work on resiliency issue and to plan for storms and to plan for evacuations, for inclement weather. That's good. In Connecticut, I had this question the other day in an environmental forum in Hartford. So we're downwind from 14 different states. We get our power from natural gas, oil, nuclear, other resources. The only way to reduce that is to bring in more nuclear. Renewables are great, but they're never going to power the whole state. It's not going to happen. You still need that baseload power. So I think that way, I agree with the governor. We should bring in more nuclear and do our best to power the grid that way. But Connecticut's a small state, and we do the best we can. And we're certainly not going to be able to make that big of a difference because we're downwind from all these states.
I think that the question really is a big question. What can we do as a state to really ensure that we have a future for our children and our grandchildren, a planet that survives? And I don't think any of us right here have the answer to that big question. It's a huge question. I know that we can't do it alone in Connecticut. I know we have to partner with other states, and I hope that our country would partner with other countries to look at this question globally. But I think within the confines of what we can do for Connecticut to reduce our energy use, to reduce, to use greener energy sources, to be environmentally conscious, we should do everything we can, because we're just a small part of it. I mean, I remember when we, and I think both of you were on the committee, when we had in the Environment Committee, we banned plastic bags. It was a really tiny step, but it's something we all got used to really quickly. Wasn't the end of the world that we no longer get these plastic bags at our grocery store. But everything we can do to impact the environment in a positive way, we should do.
Thank you. Here's a farm question. What initiatives can the state undertake to support agritourism? Farmers need a more diversified revenue stream to survive.
So that's a great question, and that's a complex question. It's hard to answer in 2 minutes what we can do to support agritourism or to support farmers in general. I mean, I think I do want to speak to what DOAG and OPM through DOAG did about a month or so ago, plus, and ultimately what I do appreciate the governor doing in placing a moratorium on what was ultimately implemented by OPM, which would have, I think, crushed many in the agricultural and farming community. And that was essentially, DOAG, in my opinion, didn't do its due diligence in collecting surveys. So long story short, we have a public act in the state that taxes, in terms of property taxes, farmland differently than regular land, which makes perfect sense, because obviously you might have many acres of land that, if you sell to a developer, is worth a lot of money. Therefore, your property tax assessment would be huge. However, if you want to retain that agricultural aspect of the community, which many of us do, and one thing I'll say, if you support open space, you need to support agriculture, because that's the only way you're going to control. With that said, there's a public act which says that there's going to be a survey sent out every 5 years, which bases how we as a state assess, or communities individually assess farming land and its value towards farming. And it was a survey that got sent out. I think they had 4 responses, something ridiculous like that, out of all the communities, farming communities or farming land we have in the state. And ultimately, in many cases, it increased property taxes, or could have increased property taxes on farmers by about 300%. So I'm thankful for the governor for putting a moratorium on that and reevaluating it. But there's a lot more that needs to be done. We can't pretend that just stopping this is the only solution. I think farmers need to be offered more to supplement their operations, because obviously right now they're in a very difficult position and we need to support them.
This was brought to my attention about 6 weeks ago. I got a call from a representative in Old Saybrook saying, did you hear about what's going on with the farmers and their assessments? Immediately talked to Department of Agriculture. They got in touch with OPM, Office of Policy Management, who revised their numbers. And then when the governor heard the public outcry, he did the right thing. He revoked the whole thing. When it comes to agritourism, I completely agree. We had a bill in the Environment Committee that would limit the litigation against if you're an Averill Farms up in Washington, or if you're a Blue Jay Orchards in Bethel, or you have a small farm with a petting zoo, it limits the liability if someone trips and falls, something like that. So we did put a bill through like that. So I agree, agritourism is a good thing. We should be doing everything to help the farmers, and a lot of those bills come through our committee, and I'm complete support. And whenever we have a public hearing on a farmer's day, I run out and get their number, and Willie, who drove his tractor to Washington, comes to all the meetings. We call. I always pick up the phone and call and say, how's this going to affect you? And I have those numbers in my phone. So I certainly, one of the reasons I got into this, I don't want to pass legislation that hurts anybody. I want to pass legislation that makes Connecticut better, and that's what we're trying to do.
So actually, I think this is one where we have full agreement. The governor did take that action. It was supported by every caucus of the General Assembly. I think the thing that I've noticed since I've been going to Hartford, and that I didn't realize before, is there are a lot of small farmers in Connecticut who are struggling, and there are a lot of young farmers, and we want to encourage those young farmers to be able to survive in this economy and to carry on that tradition. And that's, I think, it's very much embedded in many of us, especially those of us who are a little older, that was sort of the the real staple community of our country. And I think that here in Connecticut, we should support our farmers, and I think agribusiness is really important. I think agritourism is really important. Agribusiness is a little more problematic. And I think what we're really looking for here is to help the small farmer in Connecticut.
Cool. All right, here is a housing question. A recent proposal to build 830G housing in New Milford used the state formula that determines affordability to show that the affordable units would rent for close to $2,200 a month. This is not affordable to anyone who needs a less expensive place to live. And only 30% of the units have to be affordable. So who wins? The developers. Who loses? Those who need help. What can be done to promote affordable housing that is really affordable?
It's a great question. I mean, so one of the things is, and one of the frustrations I have with 8-30G, I don't think it's done a good job for affordable housing in our state, frankly. I believe that it's done, to the point of the question that was asked, I think it's done a lot more to just simply help developers make money and create unaffordable housing units in previously open space areas in our communities, and basically strip away our local zoning laws. I understand that the cause is noble, and I appreciate that, but I think there's a lot of issues with the formulation of 8-30G. And if you can get housing experts, you can get mathematicians, and they have a difficult time equating how those numbers and housing stock is calculated. There's a reason my dad can tell you I got a C in math all the time, so it's not me to figure out. But one of the things that I'll say, frankly, is that there's not enough reserved towards senior affordable housing stock. And that's one of the bigger problems, that a lot of the equation, I think it may be even done purposely, is to almost disincentivize senior affordable housing stock as opposed to general otherwise affordable housing stock. And I would argue that, at least in the communities that I represent, the most contact I receive are from seniors that are looking to downsize, stay in the community, and really would benefit from senior housing. And so I think one correction I would recommend, at least towards increasing the senior housing stock, is to at least adjust the formula in 8-30G to count senior housing stock at the same level as otherwise affordable housing stock would be counted.
I think, Steve, you hit on point by point everything that I would like to say. But as my wife's a teacher, and she gets frustrated in the town she works because with 830G, the developers come in and they're constantly building, and then it keeps outgrowing the schools. So that's a problem, and that just to add to what Steve said.
So I actually really agree that the term affordable housing has been totally perverted. It isn't affordable. That ratio that the formula they use to establish and call it affordable is, I think, really frustrating to a lot of people who can't afford affordable housing. And so I think I agree that we shouldn't use that term on something that's not really truly affordable for people. I think the big problem, though, has been that we have not found a way for municipalities in our state to build truly affordable housing. It's just not happening. I know we're going to get, I think I've been working with the people in Danbury. There's an organization, a very strong nonprofit, that's going to build 80 units of senior housing on Main Street. I'm all for it. We've been trying to help them with finding monies from the state and from the federal government. But I think that really part of the problem is that we don't have truly affordable housing in our state. And I would like to see us move towards more affordable housing. I don't think, though, I haven't seen any of the solutions coming forward from any of our municipalities, really, and that's a problem.
Thank you. Okay. We're getting down, guys. So here we go. This one's about ICE. What can we do to protect our communities against masked, unidentified ICE agents who are not presenting signed judicial warrants? as a brown-skinned citizen, I am concerned. I added a little more to that question to just make it clearer, so I apologize to Millie, but the question is what can we do to protect our communities?
So one of the problems we have, I think, with the Trust Act is that it doesn't allow our law enforcement to work with ICE. And I think in a lot of situations in which we've seen, the unfortunate incidents too, unfortunately at this point, tragically, both in Minnesota, is that it's individually ICE and not involving our law enforcement. And so I think one of the unintended consequences of the Trust Act is it bars law enforcement from communicating at all with ICE or immigration authorities. And so I think ways to avoid situations in which I admittedly don't want to see, and I think we would all agree in this room, don't want to see where ICE is in the middle of the street getting into these terrible, awful confrontations that in some cases have ended up tragic, is if we simply allow law enforcement through the courts to be able to truly identify those that are violent criminals and to be able to deport them in a manner which is not confrontational, not in the middle of the street, and safe for everybody involved, including the individual that may be detained by ICE that is a convicted criminal, and ICE being able to detain that individual properly with law enforcement cooperation. And I think that would, if one of the things that you're seeing is in Minnesota, there's currently discussions about involving the state of Minnesota handing over those that are being identified, particularly the criminals in the state, as opposed to ICE seeking those individuals out in the general community. So I think, again, one of the unintended consequences of the Trust Act was not allowing law enforcement locally and state troopers to communicate at all with ICE. You could have an individual literally facing murder charges in our state, and our troopers and our law enforcement can't speak with immigration at all. There's something wrong with that. If you're committing murder in this country, you should, as a law enforcement official, be able to communicate with immigration control.
Here's what's happened. I told you what I did for a living before, and for decades what we did was through probation, parole, through Department of Corrections, through the courts, through the police department. If someone came in and immigration had to detain her, they would cooperate. I worked closely with Secret Service, DEA, FBI, did cases with all of them, and then suddenly the state passed the Trust Act and said, but you can't work with this federal agency. So what happened was, for decades, it was happening behind closed doors, and the person had a warrant through ICE, and it was taken peacefully in a secure environment. What the Trust Act did was drive that into the street and cause what the problem that's going on right now.
Wow. That is not what the Trust Act does, and I'd rather... Let me just ask in this room, that all the people that are just now clapping, do you believe someone is entitled to due process? Because what you said, Steve, is someone who is accused of murder, and then you said somebody who commits murder, and those are two very different things. The Trust Act, which I brought a copy of because I heard you say this the other day, Pat, and I didn't think it was right. The Trust Act allows our law enforcement and our government agencies to interact with and communicate with ICE in the event of people have been convicted of Class A and B felonies and a good number of Class C felonies. So that's in the Trust Act now. So unless you're saying that you think our law enforcement should take people away who have not had due process, who have not been convicted, that have only been accused, then you're clapping for the wrong thing. If you believe everyone deserves due process, then you shouldn't be clapping for this, because that's what the Trust Act does.
Well, that's Lincoln Riley's parents. Right.
Yeah. So let me just say, what I just heard from the audience is that people are illegal because they're not here legally. And that is what I've heard from a lot of people. And if that's where you want to go, that's what's happening. That's what happened in Danbury. That's what happened to the young man who was in the public defender's office, and he had not committed a Class A or Class B or Class C. He had not committed a felony, and he was taken away by ICE. Last August, that happened in Danbury. So if that's what you want, if that's what you're saying, then in fact, clap for it. If you think that we should be taking every person who came to this country without documentation, who overstayed a visa, then clap for it. But I don't think that way. I just can't agree with that. And I certainly can't agree with the way ICE is being masked and coming into our communities and frightening all of the immigrants and all of the people of color in my community.
Problem Biden created.
Well, I guess to carry on for ICE for a second, I think some people want to know, well, some people would like to know, what would, oh, here it goes. If ICE came into your kid's school,
I think we've had enough.
hypothetically, what would you want the school to do? What would you want the school to do?
Cooperate.
I refuse you to use my child as a prop. Obviously, a lot of people in this room care about their children. I wouldn't want to see any harm done to any child in this state, including my own kids or any of your kids. I understand that. I understand that aspect. And I think that questions like that, I understand why it's passionate, and we all have passion surrounding these issues. But at the same time, I think it's unfair to usurp individual children, my children, Pat's children, or Julie's children, and ask them political questions like that.
Can I just say...
With that said, I understand why the question is being made, and I do agree there should be protection surrounding our schools. I don't think it's fair for ICE to come into a school and take a child. I wouldn't agree with that method. But to insert my specific child or anyone's specific child into that, I think is generally unfair. So.
I think the question, I agree with you that I don't think anybody sitting here would want to see that. And I do think that the schools, the State Department of Education gave good guidance on how to address ICE agents if they came to the school. And I think there are procedures in place, and I know this is upsetting, and I see how upsetting it is. I know what happened in Connecticut with the young man who just a few days before graduation was deported, and I think that had a huge impact on our state to see that happen, and it was so unfair. And I think that the fact that we got him back was because people spoke up, people took action, people pressed to return Kevin to Meriden, and that happened. And so I think that we have to be really careful, though, because I think people are really afraid that this is going to happen in our state, because you see it happening right now in Minnesota. Not so much in the schools, but I think what we've seen visually is scaring people, and that's real fear. It's not imagined fear. And so I'm glad to hear you say that. I'm not surprised that you said it. I know that I had a very difficult time with something on Facebook, and I know nobody should have to go through that. And I appreciate Senator Harding for saying what he said, that no kid should have to deal with that.
We're getting towards the end and only a couple of questions left, so we'll shift gears and go to a question about, it's a firefighter question. Let's see. Connecticut and the country is a volunteer firefighter state. They work for free, but they require equipment and gear that is up to date and maintained. Costs have skyrocketed due largely to industry consolidation and private equity buy-ups. These increased costs are paid by taxpayers, in property taxes. What will you do to contain these runaway costs in Connecticut and save taxpayers? Sorry if I mutilated that question, it was a little hard, the handwriting. So that was the question is, how to help them contain these runaway costs and save taxpayers.
I mean, obviously, we have a hard enough time, understandably so, recruiting volunteer firefighters in our communities. It's very fortunate that we have the number that we do, considering they're volunteer. We don't pay them, and they're literally running into burning buildings to save us because we're their neighbors. And so, if there's a way that we could potentially look into offsetting costs for these volunteer fire departments, then I don't know who could possibly disagree with that. I think, frankly, we should be doing more. We're actually having, from what I'm hearing from many of particularly my smaller departments in the northwest corner of the state, they're having a more and more difficult time recruiting men and women to join the volunteer fire departments, just because it's very difficult in today's day and age with children and the busy lives that we lead to be able to train for the amount of hours that you have to train to get your proper certifications to become a firefighter. So if we could find ways to provide incentives to the volunteer firefighters in the community, whether it be property tax benefits, which I know some communities do, whether it be purchasing more gear for them to continue to practice and save us. These are all areas I'm open to, and I think we all should be open to.
Thanks. I know we have some volunteer firefighters here tonight, and I've always voted for legislation to support any tax credits, anything we can do for them. But I don't want to talk just to talk. Whoever wrote the question, come see me after, and we'll talk about anything you need to do for legislation.
So I've been working through the Labor Committee on a lot of firefighter protection legislation, and I think we've done some really good work in the last several years. I think one of the things that makes it difficult to recruit is that it's not just the danger of fighting a fire, which I know volunteers, really face that danger, as do all our firefighters, but there's also dangers of contracting cancer, which is really happening now at a very high rate. So one of the things that we did was to create a cancer relief fund for our firefighters that mirrors the benefits of the workers' compensation program. And it's done for not just career firefighters, but every volunteer firefighter is qualified for that as well, is available to them. So I think there's a lot more we can do. We just had a policy discussion where we really looked at, people might not know this, but we have far many more volunteer firefighters than we do career firefighters in our state. We, unbelievably numbers of volunteers. And I think we do have to look at how do we make sure those volunteers have access to training. Like you said, it's impossible for a lot of volunteers to work throughout the day and then go to Windsor Locks to the training academy. That's not practical. And the cost of the equipment, we found that too many departments don't have proper breathing equipment. They're having a hard time getting 2 sets of turnout gear, and we know now that we're going to have to replace turnout gear in all of our fire departments because of the PFAS that's in them. And that's going to happen very soon, which is the right thing to do. We have to ban PFAS in the uniforms, the turnout gear that our firefighters are using, because we now know that it contributes to the cause of cancer. So there's a lot we should be doing for our firefighters. I have been on the forefront of this through the Labor Committee, and we'll continue to work on these issues.
All right, folks, well, it's getting late, and I'm sure everyone wants to go home, and we're right around at the end. It's about 8:20, almost 8:25. So I just really wanted to thank everyone for questions. If we didn't get to a question, I'm sure you can ask directly to our legislators. Sorry, that's it. That's really it. Please ask them directly. We will have a link to this recording on YouTube afterwards if you want to share with anyone who couldn't make it. And I want to thank the town of New Milford, Dave, and facilities in particular for allowing us to use this space. And I want to thank our officials for coming. Thank you so much. Much appreciated. And thank you all for coming.